Forgive the terrible view. I'm just under the on the bottom bunk. On the bottom bunk, yeah. What did I want to say? Just the job. The job's going really well, and I think in the last 2 days there's been some sort of it feels like some sort of a breakthrough, perhaps. But it could have just been one of those things. It was just a matter of time. But yeah. But it seems to have happened very quick, and I got two well dones, two pats on the backs from me, from me boss, basically. But it was just with the now that I've been at the autism job now about 2.5 months working. Getting to know each of the clients and trying to see how best to the ones that are sort of, because you just got to find their way of communicating, and some of them that are verbal but aren't conversational, and but only ever say sort of things. Well, I'm thinking of one person in particular, but who only ever say what they mean when anxiety levels reach such an extreme level that they're finally able to sort of articulate exactly what it is that they want. Other than that, the subtleties of, or like even the precision of what they want. It just has to be, you have to, you sort of second guessing them. It's all sort of, it's not vocalized, which can be a bit of a problem. But today I really felt like I'd cracked this service user in particular. Cracked in terms of like figuring out the way to just connect, feel like you actually had a connection with, because I just couldn't. He just, yeah, there was a distance in between us, but and like smiles on his face, which and I wasn't too sure whether this, when he was smiling, it was some sort of nervousness or some reflex response, and he wasn't actually, didn't, it bore no correlation to how he was feeling on the inside. But I almost feel like after today it was just a very long, intense period. We were sort of stuck at a place which is that designed for crafts and so on, and garden and so on, like that. Because it was such a bad day weather-wise, we didn't do anything outside, and so we just sat in this big hut, this big shed all day, and just waited until lunch came. And we got there fairly early, about 10:30, and lunch wasn't until 12:30. So it was literally a good 2 hours just sat there, and I was just like, I didn't. Well, maybe that's why it lasted so long. Because I had no idea how long it was going to be. It took me by surprise. But I basically just had to sort of, figure out a way in which to sort of bond, and I just picked up on the fact that, he does. I always got the impression that he was looking for a way to sort of reach out, and the only way he could sort of do that and communicate, and by just like not even having to think about it, was to just relay to you what, ask you what was for tea that later on that night. And it just reminded me of a little bit of the way neurotypical people, it's just ask each other about the weather. They're not really that, or just say something about the weather. They're not, they're just, it's a way of sort of developing or even creating some type of relationship, however temporary, with the person, with a new person, person that you don't know particularly well. Like an icebreaker, basically. And so his but there was nothing meaningful, really. It didn't mean anything. So instead of doing that, when we were sort of, whenever I was, so we were both sat there, and I was like, "Are you okay?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, yeah, whatever." He actually wasn't saying whatever, but he said, "Yeah." But you wouldn't actually ever get a sense that he really felt, you really felt he was okay from his facial expressions. And then I just caught onto the fact that every 10 or 15 minutes or so, I could feel his sort of gaze, his stare into this, staring to the side of me head. He was sort of, maybe he was a little bit agitated and looking for some sort of reassurance, and he was hoping to find it in my face. And so whenever I felt this sort of stare looking at me, I would literally turn to look at him, and he's got a very intense sort of stare, like he's searching for a connection. He's reaching out with his eyes to your eyes until he sort of feels like there's some sort of connection, and then you're sort of like, okay, settle that back down. But it was just simply, the connecting was all not done in the speech this time. It was all done in the meeting of eyes, in the meeting of stares. It was all done, and it was just like we just stare at each other intensely. We were sat very close anyway, and just like staring intensely at each other. Well, he would stare at me, and I would meet his gaze and smile, and then he's sort of quite mimicky, so he'd reciprocate, and a smile would crawl across his face, and the more and more it happened, the bigger his smile, and the more genuine it sort of looked, the less unsure it became, the more sure of itself it was, and to the point where, it sort of, at one time, his smile bubbled over into like a little chuckle, a little giggle, and that sort of like set me off a little bit, and so on. So for the most part, it was, from my side, it was a way of to build rapport, but it sort of, on the odd occasion, it did spill into genuine just laughter from, the surprise of what was going on. Like, this is, the way laughter, or it's like a smile, can be infectious. It infected, I set it off, it infected him, and then his response infected me back in return. So I had a nice knock-on effect, and that just carried on for two hours up until dinner time. And then after that, he was just literally fine for the whole day. Went for a nice big walk, and when I got back into work, we got back in, and everyone was surprised. Like, I'd not had any trouble with him, or I'd not had to, administer or any sort of like calm down medicine, just in case of his anxiety reached a level that could pose problems to himself and other people around. There was none of that. No repetitive sort of need for stimming or anything like that, or repetitive actions. It was, and in the end, like, I was like, oh, you know what? I was actually meaning to do this right at the very end of our walk on the way back home, but I forgot. And then later on, I saw him there, just sat there, and I wanted to give him a high five. And I know how he likes things being symmetrical, so I tried to do it with two hands, and I gave him a high five with two hands. I put them up, but then he put his palms sort of like out. It's a sort of like an underarm type thing, so I strike down on his palms. So I did that, and it sort of, it was all right. It didn't feel like I was doing it right, or it was in the method that he sort of wanted. And like later on, I saw him in the office. I was just about to go home, and then I said, "Hey, let me give you another high five again," and hold my hands out in the sort of typical, but both hands out in the sort of, to give a double high five. And he sort of like put his palms out again for me to sort of slap them, but then. And then he told me, just spoke to me very clearly, use your other hands. And then he put out his thumbs, as in like two thumbs up. And he told me to put my two thumbs up, and he said, we touch thumbs, and that's how you do it. So he corrected me in how to sort of, and he doesn't, that's just, usually if someone's doing something wrong, he gets very agitated and worked up, but he corrected me, and it was very calm correction as well. And still no resorting to his repetitive phrases that he uses in order to sort of navigate the anxiety. It was all just very relaxed and calm, and he was a really good, looking into his eyes, I felt, yes, we've finally made some sort of connection. And the fact that this constant reassuring every 10-15 minutes, and it lasted for so long, and up until the point where we could literally, it could have lasted for longer. It just signaled to me that his agitation was something that which could be steered, it could be managed, over and over again. I was just like, is this a fluke that he's staring into my face, I'm looking at him and smiling back, and that sort of keeps him calm for the next, because we were in a big shed. It was noisy. There were lots of other service users there doing their own sort of with their own behaviours and their own way of sort of acting and so on, which to other people with autism might be a bit stressful. I mean, some of them are quite loud, and they've got the very they all have their own particular way of doing things. So you get a load of those people all acting in completely different ways, and that it's a recipe for anxiety for a lot of people. So and there was just not, and he just seemed to and he was just stood still, looking at it all, observing, sat next to me. The key thing I thought, from my point of view, was just, I think I wasn't talking to anyone for the most part. Well, 90%, 95%, about even 97% of the time, I wasn't talking to anyone else. I was just observing what was going on around me. We were literally, the two of us sat together, and we were just almost like a partners. I wasn't talking to someone else next to him or across him. It was just the pair of us looking out into the room. We had backs against the wall and we could see everything, and occasionally he'd look to me. I could feel this sort of glancing in the side of my head, and I'd look round and return and like smile at him, and he'd return the gaze back. Then would revert back to what we were doing, just looking out and just being observers and just observing everyone else's behaviour. So it was, and we were in the, whilst I sort of observed other support workers talking about like just shite, just talking about what they were doing that weekend, and for one point it seemed as though they were the ones with some sort of like mental illness. The way they were sort of, I don't know, it was very odd, but the way they were responding was almost I don't know, I can't put my finger on it, but it was just, I was observing it from both sort of angles, and how I was behaving in the end was pretty good, and it worked, and I got a big well done from my boss, and we'll see if it can last. But I don't know, I just get the sense it might be attracting some sort of animosity from my fellow teammates, but I don't think it's going to be any issue. I can't handle. I'm not interested in them. I'm interested in being able to connect and with the service users and building upon their strengths, finding out what they are, and then seeing how far that can go, and teasing it, milking it out of them. So that's that, yeah.